Okafor learned to read by the glow of a kerosene lantern that hummed like a bee on humid Enugu nights. Her mother, Mama Rose, balanced peppers and tomatoes at Ogbidi market by day, then balanced hopes on her knees at evening prayers. "Nan, your name is a promise," she would whisper, tapping Charity's forehead. Charity grew up counting coins, carrying baskets, and memorizing decimals that stretched further than their rent. She loved still mornings. Charcoal smoke outside, a rooster's quarrel with dawn, school uniform dried stiff on a string. When rain battered their zinc roof, she recited multiplication tables to drown the drip. Every report card traveled home wrapped in nylon, pressed like a treasure map. "We will move forward gradually," Mama Rose would say, folding the paper with reverent fingers. Charity believed her. She believed life could be built slowly, like okpa steamed in leaves, firming with patient heat. In moments she drew buildings in the sand, a glass office, a conference table, a nameplate that carried hers. She did not yet know the city that would test her, nor the handsome smile that would study those dreams and borrow them until they almost forgot their original owner. Years layered themselves like market wrappers around Charity's resolve, each season adding grit. She won a state scholarship, then a university place in Nsukka, commuting in buses that coughed like old men yet carried dreams. In hostels of kerosene and ambition, she studied finance while frying plantain for roommates who paid in borrowed notes. When grades came, she folded them gently and called home. "Mama, it is good," she would say. "It will be better," Mama Rose answered. "Don't hurry the pot, let it boil right." After graduation, Lagos called with its promise. She arrived with one suitcase, 3 blouses, and the address of a cousin saying, "Manage, manage," until managing became a skill. A junior role at Bello & Co. brought polished floors, guarded smiles, and deadlines that kept the night awake. Charity learned the ecosystem, the elevator politics, the praise after men repeat your ideas, the meetings where silence can scream. She bought second-hand heels that clicked with borrowed confidence and trained her voice to be steady when her hands trembled. Every month she sent money to Enugu and wrote, "We are fine." She meant, "We are surviving, and I am not afraid of tomorrow anymore," at last. They met at a seminar in Victoria Island, where air conditioning blew like Harmaan and name tags tried to make strangers familiar. Tony Bello took the seat beside Charity during a breakout on risk strategies, late enough to be noticed, confident enough to smile as if tardiness were style. His cufflinks caught the projector's light, but his gaze drifted to her notebook when she asked a question the facilitator paused to admire. "You think in layers," Tony murmured afterward, extending a card, the company logo embossed like a seal. Charity tucked it carefully into her purse, amused by his ease, wary of the practiced charm. They bumped again at the coffee station. "I'm Tony." "Charity." "What a meaningful name," he said, drawing the word out gently. "It is a person, not a project," she replied, smiling despite herself. They laughed, light spilling into an otherwise stiff room. Later, under the seminar's networking lights, Tony listened when she spoke. He asked about Enugu, about her mother, about the lantern lessons. None of it felt like small talk, truly. "Ambition is lovely," he said, "but company matters." She didn't see colleagues folding toward him, already orbiting the gravity of his last name. The first call came that night, Tony's voice a warm baritone. "I enjoyed your question," he said. It surprised the room. "It surprised me too," Charity laughed, twisting the phone cord of a borrowed charger like rosary. Coffee became their ritual, a quiet place on Adiola Odeku where croissants broke like decisions. Steam curled above their cups, carrying cinnamon and new possibilities. Tony spoke of expansion, of legacy, of wanting a partner who could read balance sheets. Charity spoke of Enugu winds and the lantern that turned darkness into school. He listened, or looked like it. She chose not to investigate. He liked her simplicity. She liked that he knew the right questions. In small ways, he drew closer, texting reminders before presentations, sending playlists titled Focus, leaving sticky notes reading, "Brilliant." When he asked, "What do you want, really?" she answered, "To be useful, to be respected, to be steady." "Then let me brag about you," he said. She smiled, unsure how to hold being seen. Later, Peace would describe those weeks as a soft fog, comforting, blurring edges, hiding potholes. At the time, Charity thought, maybe company matters, and maybe this company will not belittle my light. Maybe yes. Peace Nwankwo announced herself the way morning announces Harmattan, brisk, frank, and somehow comforting. She and Charity had shared bunk beds at Nsuka, trading exam tips, sachet water, and secrets that bind like thread. Now Peace wore courtroom black and walked like deadlines that step aside. She met Tony over suya at a low table in Lekki, appraising him without apology. "So, Bello and Co.," Peace said, licking pepper from her thumb. "Are you humble enough to keep up with my friend?" Tony chuckled. "I try." "Try harder," Peace replied, smiling in a way pretending to be soft. Later, when he left for a call, she leaned close. "Charity, men who shine loudly sometimes keep dimmer switches for women like you." "He's different," Charity said, then sighed. "At least I want him to be." Peace softened. "Want, but watch." They walked the boardwalk afterward, gulls scribbling sky, lagoon water slapping pylons. "Promise me one thing," Peace said. "Name it." "Don't tuck your voice for comfort." Charity nodded, pressing her lips like a pledge. She didn't know a night would come when her silence would be mistaken for consent by people who should understand love and loyalty and basic decency too. Peace's loyalty was loud, practical, sometimes inconvenient in the best way. When a landlord tried to increase Charity's rent without notice, Peace drafted a letter in 10 minutes and delivered it with a smile like warning. "We can discuss fairness or face the tenancy tribunal," she said sweetly at the gate. The man blinked, reconsidered, apologized. On Sunday afternoons, Peace and Charity cooked jollof, music from a stubborn Bluetooth speaker that cut songs mid-chorus. They argued playfully about salt, about feminism, about whether Lagos traffic makes people rude or honest. Sometimes Tony joined with wine. Sometimes he canceled, without warning, too often. Each time he canceled, Peace lifted eyebrows the way umbrellas lift before rain. "I'm not keeping score," Charity would say. "I am," Peace replied. "So you don't have to." They shared the good silence that says, "I see you," even when you cannot see yourself clearly. In those pockets, Charity dared voice bigger dreams. "One day, regional director," she whispered. Peace clapped once, sharp as a gavel. "And after that," Charity smiled, "after that, I'll make room for others to climb." "Good," Peace said. "Just make sure you're the one holding the ladder, not being mistaken for it." Sharon Maxwell arrived at Bello & Co. like a luxury car, polished, precise, unbothered. Transferred from London to head operations, she wore silk that whispered and heels that spoke. In the Monday briefing, she introduced herself with a smile calibrated to charm and control. "I prize efficiency, clarity, and results," she said, accent rounded, eyes scanning as if reading a spreadsheet. Charity noticed the details. The tasteful gold watch, the neat handwriting, the habit of pausing before praise as if charging interest. During Conda, Sharon invited comments, then paraphrased suggestions until they sounded like her own. At the end, she caught Charity's gaze and held it a moment too long, smiling like someone greeting competition. In the hallway later, Tony leaned toward Charity. "Sharp, right?" "Very," Charity said. Sharon walked past, perfume clean and expensive, and nodded. "Ms. Okafor, I've heard about your crisis memos." "Impressive." "Thank you," Charity replied. "I'm keen to see how you handle pressure," Sharon added, still smiling. There was no insult, just temperature. Charity felt her spine lengthen automatically. Competition energized her and unsettled her. Quietly, strangely. She didn't know the signature on her elevation would belong to the woman studying her like a case. In the weeks that followed, Sharon established a rhythm that felt like a metronome set by an unseen conductor. She arrived early, left late, and CC'd executives on emails that were equal parts instruction and performance. Praise came like rationed sugar. Reprimands arrived warm, wrapped in phrases that sounded helpful until you tasted the afterthought. Charity watched, curious, unwilling to be cowed. During one meeting, Sharon asked for projections within 12 hours. Charity delivered a concise deck by morning, numbers snapping into place. Sharon skimmed it and said, "This is solid. Next time, anticipate my questions." "Which ones?" Charity asked calmly. "You'll learn my instincts," Sharon said, a smile pinned carefully. Tony stopped by afterward, hands in pockets. "Don't take it personally at all," he murmured. "I didn't," Charity replied. "I took it professionally." In the glass reflection, she saw Sharon looking back at them with that same slight smirk Charity couldn't yet name. Later, Peace texted, "How's the Queen?" Charity responded, "Building an empire, apparently. Peace, build yours just as tall." Charity set her jaw, reopened the deck, and added an appendix nobody requested, because sometimes the answer to condescension is excellence that leaves no room for convenient revision. Enugu welcomed Charity with dust on her sandals and memories pressed into mango trees. She traveled home for Mama Rose's birthday with a small cake and a larger secret. Happiness brewing, a man with plans, a career finding backbone. Their two-room house smelled of fried akara and afternoon rain. Mama Rose hugged her, then pulled back to study her face like a tailor studies fabric. "You look tired and taller," Mama said. "D'ailleurs." Charity laughed. Ambition adds height. They sat on woven mats sipping Zobo, gratefully together. Neighbors wandered in. Gossip floated like butterflies. Later, after everyone left, Mama Rose spoke low. "Nan, love should protect your light, not borrow it until it fades." Charity stared at her cup. "Tony is good," she said. "He believes in me, truly." "Belief shows in actions," Mama replied. "Does he sacrifice comfort to lift you, or only admire you when it costs nothing?" Charity hesitated. "He tries," she said, and felt the sentence wobble. Mama Rose squeezed her hand. "Dignity first. You can love from strength. Promise?" Charity nodded, eyes bright. She wanted to promise more, that she would never shrink again. But vows are heavier when your heart is still learning its full shape. On the night bus back to Lagos, Mama Rose's words traveled with Charity like a seatmate, elbowing gently whenever her mind drifted toward fantasy. Tony called as the city lights thickened. "Miss me?" he teased. "I did," she answered, enjoying the warmth, then sitting upright inside. "Big week ahead," he said. "Board review, new client pitches. I might be scarce." "I understand," she said. Silence hummed, for a while. "Charity," Tony added, voice softer, "I'm proud of you. Don't forget that." She smiled into the dark window. "Thank you." After the call, she typed a note on her phone. "Do not tuck your voice for comfort." At dawn, the bus rolled past billboards that promised impossible waistlines and effortless wealth. Lagos stretched awake, impatient, and glittering. Charity stepped onto the pavement with her small suitcase and the bigger decision to choose dignity daily, quietly, repeatedly. In her inbox, Sharon's meeting requests had multiplied like deliberate pressure points. Peace texted, "You good? Charity good and alert." "Peace, I'm nearby if you need me," she breathed out. Another note, "Excellence first, emotions later." It wasn't coldness. It was a way to keep her heart from making agreements her future could not afford. Mike Okafor wore optimism like a jacket too big. It slipped from his shoulders, yet he refused to remove it. Younger by 4 years, he had the kind of mind that could dismantle a radio and rebuild it better. Yet HR desks kept asking for experience he could only gain by being hired. "Sis, I swear I'm close," he said over a shaky video call, camera tilted at the ceiling fan. "Close is good," Charity replied. "Let's make close closer." She sent links, edited his resume, and paid quietly for an online course he didn't know he needed. When he confessed he'd pawned his laptop, she didn't scold. She wired money, said, "Recover it, promise me no more desperate moves." "Promise," he said, eyes glassy. Mike was her soft spot and steel spine together. On weekends, they brainstormed an app to help market women track debts without fear. He coded on borrowed time, she tested features. Mama Rose prayed, humming an old hymn about doors opening. "We are almost there," Mike said again. "Almost is a direction," Charity smiled. She believed in his spark the way she believed in morning, delayed sometimes by clouds, inevitable if you keep facing east. When Mike finally pitched at a small tech hub in Independence layout, his demo froze at the worst moment, cursor blinking like a stubborn eye. He called afterward, voice thinned. They said, "Come back when it works offline." "We will," Charity answered, already opening her laptop. "Tonight." They spent hours on video, testing toggles and rewriting prompts until the app behaved. At midnight, she texted Tony, "Rough night helping Mike." He replied, "You're kind. Sleep. Big day tomorrow." She stared at the message, wanting more, deciding not to ask for it. The next afternoon, Mike tried again, won the room, and sent a selfie with relief shining through sweat. "I told you," Charity laughed. "East. Keep facing east." "Sis, I won't waste this chance," he said. She closed the call and leaned back, eyes aching like muscles after carrying a friend upstairs. Later, Tony called. "Proud of you," he said. "It was Mike," she replied. "Still, you make things possible." The praise landed lightly, drifting like tissue. She placed it gently in a drawer in her mind, next to other thin compliments, and promised herself to ask life, not any man, for the kind that feels like water after walking in heat. Tony dazzled in rooms the way chandeliers do, all brightness, leaving shadows behind them for someone else to sweep. He learned Charity's rhythms quickly, texting, "Run eyes on this," at 11:48 p.m., or 2 slides on risks during lunch, trusting she would respond often. She did, loving the puzzle more than the praise, loving competence like a language she could speak anywhere. In meetings, Tony used her metaphors, the runway, the bridge, the safety net, tossing them with ease, sometimes forgetting to toss her name alongside. "It happens," Charity told herself. "Does it?" Peace asked later. "Or are you normalizing theft because the thief smiles nicely?" Charity pursed her lips. "He credits me in private." "Private credits don't pay interest," Peace said. Tony wasn't cruel, he was convenient. He booked dinner reservations with the same efficiency he rescheduled them. When he showed up beautifully, fresh shirt, inside jokes, warm hands. "I brag about you," he would say across candlelight. "Brag correctly," Charity would tease, half serious. He would lift her hand to his lips, sealing small apologies with warmth. And Charity, who knew patience as discipline, didn't yet realize patience can also disguise a leak if you never check the bucket. One Thursday, after a presentation that landed like thunder, Tony leaned against her doorway and said, "Clear your evening next week. Special night." The words fluttered around the room like confetti that not everyone signed up to sweep. "Special how?" Charity asked, arranging papers unnecessarily. "You'll see," he grinned. "Dress the way success looks on you." Her stomach answered before her mouth did, tightening with a hopeful ache. That night she called Peace. He said special night, Charity whispered, as if loudness might break it. "Celebrate your wins, not his mystery," Peace replied. "What's special this week is you." "I know, I just want him to be proud." "Make sure you are." After the call, Charity opened the closet and touched the navy dress that fit like a declaration. She rehearsed a small speech in the mirror, practicing the steady joy of saying, "I have been recommended for regional director." She imagined Tony's face softening, imagined Mama Rose's voice saying, "Gradually, 9, gradually." In bed, she typed another note, "Announce my news first." She slept with her phone face up, as if light could protect expectation from disappointment, and woke up believing patience could be a crown when worn with discernment. The quarter unfolded like a ledger written in her favor. Charity led a crisis team through a client's liquidity scare, guiding late-night calls with a voice steady enough to anchor panic. She mapped scenarios, assigned tasks, and turned chaos into a sequence of solvable events. The client sent a grateful letter, the board noticed. Mr. Adeyemi, the retiring regional director, began stopping by with questions that were mentorship in disguise. "What would you change about our reporting cadence?" She answered carefully, substance first, polish later. When junior analysts stumbled, she coached them instead of showcasing their stumbles. The team began to regard her as gravity, the thing that kept work from floating into theatrics. Sharon noticed too. Compliments cooled, expectations sharpened. Tony sent flowers with a note, proud as always. Peace texted with a clapped emoji. "Also, guard your boundaries." At home, Charity faced the mirror and practiced saying her own name without apology. Her heart trembled anyway, because growth is both wind and altitude sickness. She told herself, "Breathe, recalibrate, keep the pace slow enough to hear your footsteps." She didn't know the next step would land on marble under chandeliers, watched by people who already knew the script she hadn't seen. The invitation arrived as a calendar block from Tony. Grand Orchid, Friday, 7:30 p.m. No agenda, just a gold pin on her phone that glittered each time she refreshed. He sent a message, a night to remember. She typed and deleted 4 responses before settling on. Can't wait. In the office, Sharon's schedule suddenly aligned with hers, overlapping like 2 transparencies. There were quick glances across meeting rooms, brief smiles that said everything. Mr. Adeyemi stopped by once more, eyes kind. "You're ready," he said. "For what?" she asked, pulse rising. He only patted the table and walked away, humming a tune she couldn't place. Peace insisted on helping her choose earrings that looked like resolve. "Whatever happens," Peace said, "your news is yours." Charity placed the promotion letter in a slim folder and slid it into her handbag like a secret lantern. She rehearsed again, softer this time, as if speaking to her younger self. "You worked for this." Friday arrived with sunshower light and a taxi that smelled of pine and patience. The city glimmered by as if it knew a chapter was turning. Charity pressed her palm over her bag and whispered, "I will speak first, tonight." That morning began with a summons. Mr. Adeyemi's office, 9:15. Charity walked in with her notebook and the heartbeat of someone trained not to expect too much. The blinds were open. Legos stood outside, glittering and unbothered. He gestured to the chair, then to a folder. "I have two things," he said. "Retirement papers, mine, and a recommendation letter, yours." Her breath forgot itself. "Sir?" "You've held this region together quietly," he said, smiling like a father would if work allowed softness. "I am recommending you as my successor. The board is aligned." Her hands wanted to shake. They obeyed instead. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me," he replied. "Thank your record. Lead with the same patience that built it, and courage when patience is misread." He slid the letter across. Her name looked bigger, as if authority were a font size. "The formal letter will be signed today," he added. "You'll receive it by afternoon." She stepped out, paused in a stairwell, and let herself gasp once. Then she texted Peace one word, "Rising." Peace responded with fireworks and a line. "There you are." Charity clutched the rail and whispered, "Thank you," to the unseen timing that matched her work. By afternoon, the formal letter arrived with the efficiency of a courier who knew the worth of his parcel. Charity broke the seal and saw her name again, larger, anchored by clauses that tightened like well-made knots. At the bottom sat a clean signature, Sharon Maxwell, head of operations. The irony blinked up at her like a polite joke. Sharon called her in moments later. "Congratulations, Ms. Okafor," Sharon said, gesturing to a chair that felt slightly too low. "Thank you," Charity replied, steady. "Leadership is a mirror," Sharon continued. "It doubles everything, flaws, strengths, and consequences." "I understand." "Good," Sharon's smile held. "Tonight, Tony has something planned. I expect you'll both represent the company well." Charity nodded, surprised. "We all hear things," Sharon added lightly, as if discussing traffic. "I'll be there," Charity said. Back at her desk, she slipped the letter into a slender folder and placed it in her handbag, palm lingering on the leather. The office hummed, unaware of the storm rehearsing its entrance. She texted Peace, signed. Peace replied, crowned straight. Charity exhaled, lifted her chin, and thought, "Tonight, I speak first, and I will watch who claps before they ask what the toast is for." Evening slid over Lagos like silk, catching on billboards and high-rise windows as Charity dressed with deliberate hands. The navy dress settled on her like a decision kept. She chose pearl studs, quiet, resilient, and swept her hair into a bun that felt like a crown. On the bed lay her handbag, unzipped, the signed letter resting inside its folder like a lantern. She touched it once, then twice, as if heat could pass. Her phone buzzed. Tony, car at 7 o'clock. Peace sent a selfie with thumbs up and the caption, "Remember who you are before anyone speaks." Mama Rose's call arrived next. 9, I'm praying. Wear your peace like perfume. Yes, Mama. She looked in the mirror and practiced. I have news, she said aloud, testing pacing, testing breath. She checked the time, pressed her palms together, and smiled at the woman in the glass. You worked for this, she whispered. In the hallway, other tenants murmured greetings, frying onions perfuming the air. Lagos sounded like a choir tuning horns, voices, wheels, hope. Downstairs, a sleek car idled. Charity slipped into the back seat and held her bag on her lap, like a promise she was finally ready to speak without apology. Grand Orchid glowed like a story that had rehearsed its happy ending. Chandeliers, waiters who glided. Tony met her at the entrance, handsome in a way that made strangers forgive lateness. He kissed her cheek, a warmth. You look like victory, he said, offering his arm. Thank you, Charity replied, heart steadying. I have an announcement. Perfect, Tony said, leading her through velvet air. So do I. The words brushed past her like a playful gust. She smiled, missing their edge. The private hall opened onto a long table dressed in white, familiar faces unfurling like flags, colleagues from departments, clients, Tony's relatives, even Sharon seated near the center. Charity swallowed, surprised by the crowd, then disciplined her thoughts. She touched her bag, felt the rectangle of her folder, and took the seat Tony indicated. A violinist skimmed the room with gentle melodies. Sharon raised a glass toward Charity, the kind of salute that could be respect or symmetry. Later, Sharon mouthed, smile precise. A waiter refilled water. Glasses clinked. Conversation shimmered. Charity inhaled, timing the rise and fall of her lungs with the violin's arc. She told herself, speak first, and lifted her hand to touch her glass right now. Peace arrived at Charity's apartment the next morning carrying steaming akara and pap, her courtroom bag still slung over her shoulder. She didn't sit until she had scanned Charity's face, the way a mother studies her child for fever. You didn't sleep, she said flatly, unwrapping the paper. Charity attempted a laugh, tucking her hair behind her ear. I had a lot to think about. You always do, Peace replied, sliding a plate across the table. They ate in silence for a while, the small room filled with the hum of Lagos traffic. Then Peace set her spoon down and leaned forward. Charity, I have to say this plainly. Tony dazzles, yes, but men who love your mind don't leave you practicing speeches alone. You've been rehearsing something important for weeks, haven't you? Charity froze, her hand hovering above her pap. How did you know? Because I know you, Peace said, her eyes fierce but kind. And because I've watched you dim your shine for him. You look at him as if he's the prize, forgetting you're the gift. Charity's throat tightened. She wanted to defend him, to defend the fragile hope she was holding. But Peace's words cracked open the part of her that remembered Mama Rose's warnings. Charity folded her hands in her lap, her voice breaking. Peace, he means well. He supports me in his way. Tells me he's proud. Peace tilted her head, unamused. Words are soft currency. They spend fast. But what's their value when actions bankrupt them? Does he show up for you when the room needs to know your name? Or does he leave you carrying bags of victories alone? Charity looked away, tears filling her eyes. Peace reached across the table, her hand steady. I don't want you mistaking audience applause for love. You are more than the silence you give yourself. Charity nodded, swallowing hard. I'm afraid to believe that, she whispered. Then let me believe it for you until you can, Peace said firmly. The two women sat in that quiet, a sisterhood of truth between them. Charity finally exhaled. Tonight is supposed to be important, she said, voice trembling. I just hope he means it for the both of us. Peace gripped her hand harder. If he doesn't, remember this. You're not walking into that restaurant alone. You walk with every sacrifice, every lantern light, every prayer, Mama Rose whispered. That's your true company, not a man's performance. The evening after her call with Peace, Charity dialed Enugu, and Mama Rose's voice spilled warmth through the static. Nan, how is Lagos treating you? She asked, her tone both curious and cautious. Charity hesitated, then answered, Lagos is busy, Mama. The office keeps stretching me, but I'm learning. Mama Rose hummed knowingly. Stretching can strengthen or it can snap. Which one is it? Charity smiled faintly. I think it's strengthening. But Mama, can I ask you something? How do you know when a man's love is safe? Mama Rose's silence lasted a beat too long before she sighed. Love is safe when it holds your light steady, not when it flickers whenever the wind blows. Does Tony steady you, or do you steady him while you drown? Charity closed her eyes. He says I'm his pillar. Pillars hold weight, Nine, but who holds the pillar? Mama Rose's words pressed against her chest, forcing questions she had buried beneath Tony's charm. They talked late into the night, Mama Rose recounting her own marriage, how her husband's respect had been her true dowry until death parted them. Remember, Charity, she said gently, a crown is lighter when two heads share its weight. Don't wear one that pushes you down instead of lifting you up. Charity stared at her ceiling after the call, her heart heavy with conflicting truths. Mama Rose had never doubted Tony openly before, but tonight her voice trembled with worry. She thought back to the day Tony had called her his anchor, his safe place. and how the words had felt like silk then, but now felt more like chains. In the stillness of the night, she whispered, "Am I holding too much?" The question lingered, unanswered. She tried to picture Tony listening to her dreams, not just nodding, but investing in them. Yet the image blurred. Instead, she saw Peace's eyes, Mama Rose's warnings, and the shadow of Sharon's smile at work. She tossed and turned, wrestling with unease, but still she chose hope. She told herself tomorrow's dinner was a chance, that Tony's words about a special night were more than hollow promises. Yet even as she prayed, a strange heaviness lingered, as though her spirit already knew the applause she longed for might not be hers to hear. Charity clutched her pillow, repeating Mama's line, "Don't wear a crown that pushes you down," till sleep dragged her into dreams she would forget, but the unease would remain. Charity met Tony for lunch at a quiet bistro in Victoria Island, the kind of place with soft jazz and waiters who moved as if rehearsing. She arrived early, rehearsing her own lines about the promotion letter tucked away in her bag. Tony breezed in 20 minutes later, apologizing with a kiss on her forehead. "You've been patient with me," he said warmly, "and I want to reward that patience. This Friday, dinner at Grand Orchid. It will be a night to remember." Charity blinked, her heart skipping. "Grand Orchid?" she asked, half smiling. "Isn't that extravagant?" "For you, nothing is extravagant," Tony replied smoothly. "You deserve a celebration." Charity bit her lip, feeling hope bubble like soda. "Tony, I actually have something to announce too," she began, her fingers twitching nervously on the napkin. He reached across the table, covering her hand. "Perfect. Then let's make it a night of announcements." The way he said it sent warmth through her chest, though an invisible thread of doubt tugged. She nodded anyway, clinging to the idea that perhaps fate had finally aligned for them both. That night, she replayed the lunch in her mind, dissecting every word. A night to remember. Did that mean he was finally ready to solidify their future? Did it mean he had been planning something all along? She told Peace over the phone, her voice trembling with excitement. "Peace, I think he's going to propose. But I'm not sure," Peace snorted softly. "Or he's going to make a spectacle. Either way, Charity, promise me you'll speak first. Do not let your moment slip into silence again." "I'll try," Charity whispered. "No, you'll do it," Peace pressed. Later, Mama Rose called unexpectedly. "How's my daughter?" she asked, sensing the storm brewing beneath Charity's voice. "Mama, I think Tony wants to surprise me. I think it could be good." Mama Rose only hummed. "Then guard your joy. A thief can come disguised as a gift." Charity exhaled, brushing away her doubts. As Friday loomed, she practiced her speech until the words felt like breath. She imagined Tony smiling, the crowd clapping, and her triumph shining brighter than any diamond ring. She didn't know the script had already been written, and she was entering a play where she wasn't cast as the star. On Friday afternoon, Charity sat in a taxi, the city rushing past in streaks of light and sound, her folder resting firmly on her lap. She whispered her lines under her breath, her fingers tracing the leather of her handbag. "I've been recommended as regional director," she practiced softly. "I want to share this joy with you all." She repeated it until it sounded natural, until her voice carried the conviction she hoped to feel in the moment. The driver glanced back once, curious at her muttering, but she only smiled nervously. In her mind, she pictured Tony beaming, pulling her into an embrace, telling her how proud he was. She imagined Peace's satisfied smirk when she called later, Mama Rose's prayers answered in living color. The thought steadied her, and for a moment she let herself believe the night would unfold as she wished. She adjusted her navy dress, checked her reflection in her phone camera, and nodded to herself. "You deserve this," she whispered, as though reminding her heart to stay strong. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, and promised silently that tonight she would not be invisible. As the taxi turned toward the glittering lights of Victoria Island, her phone buzzed. A message from Tony, running a little late. "Start mingling. I'll join you shortly." Charity's stomach knotted briefly, but she forced a smile. "He's busy, that's all," she told herself. Entering the Grand Orchid, she was enveloped by chandeliers and velvet air, the kind of opulence she had only seen in magazines. A waiter led her to the private dining hall, where laughter and chatter already filled the space. Familiar faces turned toward her, colleagues from Bello & Co., Tony's cousins, even some clients she recognized. Her heart fluttered with nervousness. "This is bigger than I expected," she murmured. She touched her bag again, the letter pressing against her palm like a heartbeat. She found her seat near the center, her chest rising and falling with anticipation. "You can do this," she whispered. She rehearsed the words silently once more, her lips moving without sound. Unaware, she was preparing to speak in a room where every other voice had already been rehearsed, and hers was the only one that wasn't part of their plan. The hall was dressed like a stage for royalty, golden drapes cascading down the walls, crystal glasses catching the soft glow of chandeliers, and a violinist weaving gentle music through the air. Charity sat at her assigned place, smiling politely as greetings flowed around her. "Charity, you're glowing tonight," one colleague said, raising a glass. "It must be love." She laughed lightly, hiding her nervous excitement. Another client leaned in, whispering, "Tony has been talking about this night for weeks." Her pulse quickened. Could it be that everyone was here to celebrate both her achievement and Tony's affection? She imagined herself standing, announcing her promotion, and the room erupting in applause. She glanced at Sharon, who sat elegantly across the table, her lips curved in that familiar half-smile. Sharon lifted her glass toward her, mouthing, "Later." Charity frowned slightly, unsure of the meaning, but forced her focus back on her own moment. She felt the weight of the letter in her bag like a secret crown, waiting to be revealed. "Just breathe," she told herself, her eyes scanning the faces that surrounded her. They all seemed eager, expectant, as if rehearsed for something she hadn't yet seen. Minutes later, Tony entered the hall, commanding attention with his polished confidence. He leaned down to kiss her cheek, whispering, "You look perfect." Charity smiled, her nerves tingling. "So do you," she replied softly. As the waiter refilled their glasses and the violinist played a triumphant chord, Tony tapped his spoon against his glass. The room fell silent in an instant. Charity's heart leapt. She thought he was clearing the way for her to speak first. She rose slowly, hand trembling slightly as she prepared her words. But Tony's voice cut through the stillness. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone rich and commanding, "thank you for joining me tonight." Charity froze mid-rise, her glass caught halfway to her lips. He continued, "Tonight is about celebration, about new beginnings, about love that deserves to be witnessed." The room erupted in applause before she could even form her first sentence. She sank back into her chair, confused, her hand pressed against her bag. She looked around the table, searching for a clue, but every smile seemed rehearsed, every nod complicit. Her chest tightened. The script had begun, and it was not hers to read. Charity sat with her glass still trembling in her hand, trying to steady the rhythm of her breath as Tony commanded the hall. Every eye turned toward him, and the weight of expectation pressed against her chest like an invisible stone. She forced a smile, rehearsing in her mind the words she had prepared, but his voice drowned them out, rich and sure. "Life is sweetest when shared with those who matter most," he said, gesturing across the table. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Charity's throat tightened. She wanted to interrupt, to claim the moment she had carried in her bag like a lantern. Yet something in the way the crowd leaned forward made her sink back into her chair. "Tony," she whispered softly, hoping he might catch her voice. He didn't look at her. Instead, he raised his glass, the reflection of the chandelier dancing on its surface. The applause swelled, echoing off the walls, swallowing her silence whole. She sat frozen, wondering how quickly a dream can dissolve when another hand seizes the microphone you had been waiting for all along. Sharon shifted slightly in her chair, her polished nails drumming lightly against the stem of her wine glass. She caught Charity's gaze and held it with a smile that seemed both sympathetic and triumphant. Charity felt heat crawl up her neck. "You had something to say?" a colleague asked beside her, tilting his head curiously. She swallowed, managing only a polite shake of her head. "No, please continue." The man nodded, oblivious to the storm raging behind her eyes. As Tony's words filled the room, Charity's carefully prepared speech became an echo inside her chest, begging for release but trapped beneath layers of decorum. She glanced around the table, faces alight with anticipation, not for her, but for him. In that moment, she realized her audience had been rehearsed for a performance she hadn't been invited to play in. The toast she had nurtured on taxi rides and mirror rehearsals withered inside her. She gripped her handbag tighter, feeling the firm outline of her letter, a silent witness to a victory she couldn't yet claim aloud. Tony's hand slipped into his pocket with deliberate grace, his smile broadening as he drew out a small velvet box. Gasps rose like a wave crashing against the chandelier-lit walls. Charity's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as time slowed into cruel fragments. He held the box high, then lowered it with reverence, opening it to reveal a diamond ring that caught the light like fire. "Tonight," Tony declared, his voice deep with practiced confidence, "I choose to honor the woman who has given me purpose, strength, and vision." The room erupted in applause, cheers bouncing across the table. Charity's lips parted, her eyes stinging as she waited for her name to be spoken. Then she saw her. Sharon rose gracefully, her red gown hugging every curve, her face glowing with a blush that seemed too perfectly timed. She walked toward Tony, each step echoing like thunder inside Charity's chest. When Sharon reached him, Tony bent down, sliding the ring onto her finger with a smile that never faltered. "Sharon Maxwell, will you marry me?" he asked. Sharon covered her mouth, nodding as tears of triumph slipped down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with glee. The applause shook the hall, forks tapping against glasses, colleagues whistling, and family members rising to their feet in celebration. Charity's hands grew cold, her body sinking deeper into her chair as her mind struggled to process the scene before her. She forced her lips into something resembling a smile, though her heart cracked in silence. "I knew it," someone whispered across the table. "They've been perfect together for months." Charity's ears rang. Her gaze swept across the faces around her, people she had laughed with at lunchtimes, shared notes with in meetings, greeted warmly in corridors. They were all clapping, their joy authentic, their complicity complete. She felt the room tilt, as though the very ground betrayed her. Peace's warning replayed in her head like an echo. Don't tuck your voice for comfort. But comfort had already been stolen, and the script was written without her. She reached for her handbag, her fingers trembling over the letter inside, her unspoken triumph now mocking her in its silence. For the first time in her life, her victory tasted like ashes, and the celebration around her sounded like betrayal in chorus. The sound of clinking glasses and joyous laughter stabbed deeper than any knife could. Charity sat still, her face frozen in a mask of politeness, while her insides boiled with disbelief. She looked around the room once more, searching desperately for even one sympathetic eye. None came. Instead, she found familiar smiles widened at her expense, their applause thundering over her unspoken words. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Tony kissed Sharon's hand and pulled her into a tight embrace, whispering something that made her laugh softly, the kind of laugh Charity used to think was hers alone. She could feel her chest tightening, her breath shallow as the realization set in. This wasn't just betrayal by Tony, it was betrayal by everyone in the room. They had all known. They had been invited not to celebrate her, but to witness her humiliation in full display. Her heart hammered, every pulse screaming at her to rise, to speak, to reclaim something, but her throat closed, trapping her in silence. She reached for her glass, her hand shaking, and took a sip, hoping the wine would numb the fire burning within her. It didn't. From the corner of her eye, she caught Sharon looking at her, that same half-smile playing across her lips as though the proposal had been orchestrated not just as love, but as conquest. Charity's fists clenched beneath the tablecloth, nails digging into her palm, but she held her composure, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. The conversations around her blurred into indistinct noise, words like perfect couple, destined, and finally floated around her like poison. The colleague leaned in, touching her arm. "Charity, aren't you happy for them?" The question pierced her like a blade. She turned slowly, forcing her lips into a curve. "Of course," she said, her voice steady though her soul trembled. The colleague smiled, satisfied, and returned to cheering. Charity looked down at her handbag, her fingers brushing against the folder inside. Her victory was there, sealed, signed, undeniable. Yet in this moment, it felt worthless, overshadowed by the spectacle Tony had staged. Tears pressed against her eyes, but she blinked them away. She refused to break here, not in this hall, not under their gaze. But deep inside, the betrayal etched itself into her spirit like fire-carving scars on wood. Charity waited until the noise swelled again, until Sharon's laughter rang out above the applause, and Tony basked in his own performance. Then, with measured grace, she pushed her chair back. The scrape was nearly drowned by the chatter, though a few heads turned briefly. She smiled politely, nodding as if excusing herself for something trivial. She picked up her handbag, steady hands masking the storm that raged within her. Each step toward the exit felt heavier than the last, yet her posture remained tall. She passed familiar faces, faces that once smiled at her achievements, now radiant with joy at her downfall. Not one of them stopped her, not one reached out. She walked past the violinist, whose tune seemed mocking now, past the waiters who had served her wine without noticing the tremor in her grip. Her heart pounded in her ears, each beat chanting betrayal, betrayal. She reached the doors, pushing them open into the cool night air. The silence outside struck her harder than the noise inside. The night embraced her like a mother's arms, though this embrace felt cold. She inhaled deeply, her chest rising as she whispered, "Never again." Her heels clicked softly against the pavement as she walked toward the curb, each step deliberate, each breath a battle to contain the flood threatening to break. The driver at the valet approached, holding out a ticket, but she waved him away, choosing instead to walk down the street, away from the glittering lights of the Grand Orchid. "Charity!" someone called faintly behind her, but she didn't turn. She refused to look back at the hall that had stripped her dignity. The city's night air smelled of smoke and sea, grounding her. She tightened her grip on her handbag, feeling the edges of the folder pressing against her palm, a reminder that her story wasn't over. She walked faster, her tears finally slipping free, but her pace never slowed. A passerby glanced at her, concerned, but she ignored them. She wanted no pity, no comfort, no audience. Only space to breathe, to rebuild. "This isn't the end," she whispered to herself, her voice steadier now, a vow rising from the ashes of her humiliation. The city lights blurred through her tears, but in her heart a quiet fire sparked, fragile but alive, waiting for its time to roar. The next morning, Charity sat on her couch, still in yesterday's dress, her eyes swollen from a night without sleep. She stared at the folder on the table, the promotion letter peeking out, a cruel reminder of what she had lost the chance to announce. The door burst open without warning. Peace, her face flushed with fury, stormed in. "Charity Okafor, what happened?" she demanded, dropping her handbag to the floor. Charity looked up slowly, her lips trembling. "They proposed," she whispered, her voice hollow, "to Sharon." Peace froze for a second, then exploded. "That cowardly, pompous fool," she spat, pacing the small room like a lioness in a cage. I told you he wasn't worthy of you. And Sharon? That snake, of course she would take pleasure in this. And all those people clapping like trained dogs. Hypocrites!" Charity flinched at her friend's words, not because they weren't true, but because hearing them aloud made the wound deeper. "Peace, stop," she pleaded softly. "I can't bear it." Peace turned sharply, her eyes blazing. "No, you must bear it, because this pain will either bury you or build you. And I will not stand by and watch you let it bury you." Charity's tears flowed freely now, her voice breaking. Everyone knew. They all knew, and they sat there and watched me, smiling, waiting for me to break. "Do you know what that feels like?" Peace knelt before her, gripping her hands tightly. "Yes, I know what betrayal feels like. But this is their mistake, not yours. You are not the fool here. They are. And let me tell you, Charity, their day of shame will come." Charity shook her head, her voice trembling. "But my moment is gone. I wanted to announce. I wanted to celebrate." She trailed off, glancing at the folder on the table. Peace followed her gaze, her eyes widening. "What is that?" she asked sharply. Charity hesitated, then whispered, "My promotion letter. Regional director." Peace gasped, then let out a bitter laugh. "So while they were busy humiliating you, you were carrying the crown all along. Oh, Charity, do you see the irony? They cheered for the wrong queen. Charity looked down, silent. Peace gripped her chin gently, forcing her to meet her gaze. Listen to me. This isn't over. You will rise, and when you do, every single one of them will wish they had clapped for you when they had the chance. Charity woke to the pale morning like someone surfacing from deep water, lungs burning from what couldn't be said. The dress she had laid over the chair before the dinner now lay folded across the armrest, neat and accusing, as if obedience to order had somehow invited chaos to dine. The promotion letter, still in its folder on the table, reflected a sliver of sunlight that sliced across her floor. She sat up, reached for it, and held it open as if proof could bandage humiliation. It didn't. It only clarified the contradiction, how one day can carry both crowning and crucifixion. She brewed tea and watched the bag steep, leaves unfurling like truths that would no longer compress. When Mama Rose called, Charity let the phone ring through once, twice, then answered. "Nan," her mother said, voice soft with concern. "I'm here," Charity replied. "I survived the night, and I will survive the memory. Tell me." Charity told her in a clean, spare way that left no room for pity. "Look at your letter," Mama Rose said at last. "It was signed before their performance. Your future did not ask their permission." Charity folded the paper carefully, as if tucking a child into bed, and whispered, "I hear you." The city beyond her window stirred with the ordinary. Hawkers calling, keek horns chirping, a woman laughing too loudly at something the morning said. She bathed, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, and sat at the small table with a notebook. She wrote 2 columns, what they took and what remains. Under the first she listed, a public moment, the illusion of safety, the belief that they would clap. Under the second, competence, appointment, peace, Mike, Mama Rose, breath. She stared at the second column and felt her spine straighten inside her. The door creaked. Peace had a spare key and used it. "Say it with me," Peace said, dropping a bag of fruit. "I will not audition for rooms I already own." Charity managed a smile. "I will not audition." "Good. Now what next?" "Work," Charity answered. "Quiet work that makes noise without shouting." Peace nodded. "And when you walk into that office and see them, hold your chin like you're balancing a crown no one can see." Charity exhaled slowly. "I can do that." She packed her letter into her bag, zipped it, and stood. The air tasted different, cleaner, braver, like she had finally chosen the only side that would not betray her again. Her own. On Monday morning, Charity walked into Bello & Co. with the pace of someone who had measured each step before taking it. The security guard at the door nodded with unusual respect, as if news, like scent, travels in whispers. She moved through reception, where the wall clock's second hand scraped the silence into even pieces. An elevator opened. Sharon stood inside, immaculate as ever, a diamond now flashing like a verdict on her left hand. "Ms. Okafor," Sharon said, lips tilting. "Welcome back." Charity entered, pressed the button for their floor, and met Sharon's gaze in the mirrored doors. "Thank you," she said evenly. "We have a leadership huddle at 10. I'll expect an updated pipeline," Sharon added. "You'll have it," Charity replied, then removed her eyes from the mirror and watched the numbers tick up. When the doors parted, the corridor felt longer, but the ground beneath her feet had changed. Titles travel invisibly and rearrange gravity. At her desk, she opened her laptop and found a formal announcement drafted overnight. Appointment, Regional Director, West Africa. The header bore her name in a font that did not apologize. Her chest warmed, her hands stayed steady. The leadership huddle gathered around the oval table, voices low, bodies angular with pretense. Tony slid into a seat 2 chairs away, clearing his throat once too often. Sharon took the head, opened a slim notebook, and began. "Congratulations are in order," she said, reading the corporate line. "Ms. Okafor steps in as Regional Director effective immediately." Polite claps, cautious as measured rain. Charity smiled lightly, thanked the room, and turned to the agenda. She laid out the quarter's risks and remedies with unhurried authority, no tremor, no hunger for validation, just clarity that made argument unnecessary. When she finished, someone exhaled audibly. "Any objections?" she asked, scanning faces. Silence, then Tony's voice, smoother than it felt. "None." Sharon closed her notebook. "Execution starts today." Chairs scraped, people dispersed. As they filed out, a junior analyst hovered. "Ma'i, I knew about the party," she whispered, eyes damp. "I'm sorry I said nothing." Charity paused, softened. "Next time, choose who you are before you choose where you sit." The analyst nodded, chastened and grateful. Charity returned to her office, set the appointment memo in a frame, and placed it on a shelf behind her, not as decoration, but as a reminder that identities do not live on tables where others can rearrange them. Tony found his way to her doorway before noon, knocking softly as if volume could disguise motive. He leaned against the frame, handsome like a habit she had finally broken. "Charity," he began, "can we talk?" She closed a tab and looked up. "We are talking." He entered, sat, and then stood again, unable to settle. "About the other night," he said, hands opening and closing. "I should have managed things differently." Charity folded her hands on the desk. "You staged a spectacle," she replied calmly. "Management was not missing." He winced. "Be fair." "I am," she said. "Fairness is saying exactly what happened." He moved toward contrition, the kind that asks to be admired for appearing. "I never wanted you hurt." "You wanted applause," she answered. "You got it." He flinched, then regrouped. "Look, now that you're in this role, we can." "Stop," Charity said gently but firmly. "Don't fold my appointment into your spreadsheet of advantages." He stared at her, something like surprise cutting across his face. The room held a quiet that belonged to people who used to share warmth. He broke it with a softer voice. "I did love you, you know." "You loved access," she said, "to a version of me that made your shine easier." He tried a laugh that failed to arrive. "You've become sharp." "No," she replied. "I've become audible." He glanced at the framed memo behind her, then at the door. "Will you at least congratulate me?" "On what?" "Good news," he said, gesturing vaguely toward a future he assumed would cooperate. She tilted her head. "Leadership is not a confetti cannon, Tony. It is service measured in results." He shoved his hands into his pockets. "Sharon thinks, Sharon reports to me," Charity said without heat. His sentence landed like a gavel. He blinked, sat again, eyes searching her face for the softness he used to withdraw at will. Finding none, he stood, nodded once, and reached for the old banter. "We were good," he said. "We were practice," she corrected, then softened the blow with a faint smile. "Thank you for the lessons." He paused in the doorway. "So this is it." "This is beginning," she replied, turning back to her screen. He lingered a heartbeat longer, as if nostalgia could petition reality. Then he left. When the corridor swallowed his footsteps, Charity allowed herself one long breath, the kind that returns a room to its owner, and reopened the tab whose work would outlast any ring. Power, when worn correctly, does not rattle, it breathes. Charity met with client teams across the week, stitching trust where earlier managers had tugged and frayed. She moved with an economy that made showmanship look wasteful. In a Wednesday review, a client's CFO raised an eyebrow at a recommendation. "That's unconventional." "So were your results last quarter," she answered lightly, then laid down data that turned eyebrows into nods. After the call, her team lingered in the glow of relief. "Ma'am," a senior associate said, "you have a way of making storms remember they began as weather." She smiled. "Let's keep umbrellas near, all the same." She began instituting simple rituals. Pre-mortems before launches, rotations that gave quieter analysts sunlight, written credit in every deck. Emails grew shorter because trust grew longer. She ate lunch at her desk less often and in the bullpen more, breaking bread where morale could observe kindness and believe it. Word filtered through the floors that the region finally had a spine and a pulse that matched. Sharon tried to test the boundaries in small ways, ambiguous instructions that might be blamed elsewhere, last-minute escalations that demand visible rescue. Each time, Charity answered with process, not theater, with documentation, not drama. It changed the incentive structure. Applause shifted from arsonists to firefighters. Late one evening, Sharon stepped into Charity's office, ring flashing like a lighthouse that had forgotten its purpose. "You're efficient," she said. "Clarity reduces noise," Charity replied, looking up. "Noise draws attention," Sharon countered. "Attention is not the same as respect," Charity said. A pause. Sharon sat. "You and I, we could be formidable." "We already are," Charity said evenly. "In different directions." Sharon's smile thinned. You don't gloat. There's too much work, Charity said, closing a file. And gloating is a tax most victories cannot afford. Sharon studied her for a beat, then stood. You won't make enemies by accident, she murmured. No, Charity answered. If enemies must exist, let them nominate themselves. When Sharon left, Charity texted Peace. The air is clearing. Peace replied, when fog lifts, maps look like promises. Charity leaned back, allowed herself 3 seconds of quiet joy, then returned to the work that would weather even applause. In Enugu, Mike's small team gathered beneath a ceiling fan that cut the heat into disciplined slices. The app had grown from stubborn lines of code into a tool market women could actually use. Watch, Mike told Mom and Ketchy at Ogbidi. He demonstrated how her daily sales could be logged with one tap, debts tracked without shame, and a weekly summary exported for the cooperative's loan officer. So I don't need big grammar, she asked. No grammar, he smiled. Just your thumb. Word spread like noon light. Within a month, 3 cooperatives signed pilot agreements. Mike called his sister, voice shaking. Charity, they said yes. She stood by her window, Lagos dusk pooling like melted bronze at the horizon, and closed her eyes to hold the moment still. I knew they would, she whispered. The work is honest. He laughed a little, then grew quiet. You kept me alive, sis. After that demo failed, I almost gave up. You paused, she corrected gently. Then you built again, he exhaled. Investors want a second meeting. I'm scared. Good, she said. Fear is proof you're near something worth carrying carefully. They planned strategy over late-night calls, Charity sculpting his pitch until it told a story rather than recited a wish. Start with Mama and Ketchy, she advised. Begin with a human problem solved, then show the numbers that multiply her relief. He practiced, she interrupted, he refined, she applauded minimally, training him to love rigor more than praise. Peace joined one session, playing the unfriendly investor with delightful ferocity. Who are your competitors? Why you? How will you survive if the banks build a copy? Mike stumbled, regrouped, then found his footing. We aren't a feature, he said finally, voice steady. We're a friend that speaks the user's language. When the real meeting came, he wore a borrowed blazer and the confidence of someone who had practiced in honest light. 2 angels committed seed funding contingent on milestones. He called Charity from the parking lot, crying without shame. It's happening. Step by step, she replied, smiling into the phone. After the call, she leaned against her office door, let gratitude soak her bones, and texted Mama Rose. He's flying, but with a map. Later, Tony passed her in the corridor, opened his mouth to speak, and closed it again. Some distances cannot be walked backward. Peace's case had simmered for months. A group of cleaners wrongfully dismissed when they reported safety hazards, management claimed restructuring, while hiring cousins into the same roles. In the courtroom, fluorescent lights hummed above as Peace rose, small but unignorable, her gown flowing like a sentence that would not end until justice did. Charity sat behind, anonymous, a quiet pillar. Peace called witnesses with the tenderness of someone folding shirts after washing, no theatrics, just care that made creases feel intentional. Madam Amina, she said, tell the court what happened when you reported the exposed wiring. The older woman glanced at the judge, then at Peace. They told me to focus on mopping. And when you slipped near the bucket, they laughed. Then they sacked me. Peace didn't shake her head. She let the truth hang like a bell. When the defense waived contracts and policies, Peace tracked each clause with a finger that knew where compassion hides inside law. Restructuring cannot be a costume for retaliation, she argued, voice low, controlled. Rights are not props. On Judgment Day, the court granted reinstatement, back pay, and penalties that would make copycat cruelty expensive. In the hallway afterward, the cleaners lifted Peace into an embrace that smelled of Dettol and relief. She laughed, finally allowing celebration to touch her body. Charity watched with wet eyes. You were a storm they couldn't predict, she said when they were alone. Peace shrugged, wiping mascara smudges with an unbothered thumb. I'm a cup of tea, I just kept pouring. Thank you, Charity added, for showing me what persistence looks like when it refuses to be bitter. Peace squeezed her hand. We keep each other from forgetting. Her phone buzzed. It was a reporter requesting comment. She sighed. Visibility taxes introverts. Charity smiled. Pay it today. It buys justice for others. That evening they ate bolai and groundnut by the roadside, heat licking their palms, victory settling in their shoulders. Your gala is next week, Peace said casually. The board will speak. Then you will. Charity looked past the traffic to the sky smoldering peach. I will speak, she answered. Fully, finally, and only to announce what I have built, not what anyone has allowed. Peace lifted her water sachet in a toast that needed no glass. Whispers turned into memos. Memos turned into meetings without invites. By mid-quarter, the project Tony had championed began leaking money through holes his confidence couldn't caulk. He had misread a partner's tolerance, overpromised timelines, and undercounted the cost of being charming instead of precise. In a review, Charity asked 3 questions no one else had dared. Each was a corridor that led to a room full of missing furniture. Why was the variance flagged only after the deadline? She said, voice calm. Tony's jaw flexed. We were managing perception. Perception is not cash flow, she replied. A director coughed into his fist. A junior analyst scribbled furiously. After the meeting, Tony intercepted Charity in the hallway. You enjoyed that. She met his eyes. I enjoyed clarity. You're making me look. I did not open your books, she said quietly. I only read them. He stared at her as if seeing the woman he had refused to imagine, one whose gentleness did not preclude steel. Sharon, meanwhile, navigated the fallout like someone rearranging vases while the house burned. Publicly supportive, privately irritated, she scheduled strategy syncs that brought Tony to the office earlier and sent him home later. Their murmured arguments leaked through glass, distortion making them sound like people underwater. One evening, Charity stayed late to finish a difficult model. Tony appeared at her door, tie loosened, eyes rimmed red. Help me, he said, softer than she'd ever heard. She folded her hands. With what, truth or optics? They swallowed. Both. She nodded to the chair. Truth first. For 2 hours they dissected the project until excuses lay in pieces and choices stood bare. When they finished, she pushed a sheet toward him. This is the path back. It requires apology, revised targets, and letting someone else lead the salvage. Who? A person who has nothing to prove, she said. He knew she meant not him. He also knew she was right. Thank you, he murmured. Charity? She looked up. You were always this? Yes, she said. You just liked me more when I pretended not to be. He nodded once, gathered the papers, and left with a gait that finally matched the truth's weight. Sharon's talent had always been arrangement. The right dress, the right phrase, the right timing. But arrangement fails when outcomes insist on substance. Her first misstep was small, a directive to bypass a control for speed that Charity reversed with a single email titled Maintaining Integrity. The second was larger. A client dinner where Sharon dismissed a junior's insight that later saved ₦1 million. Charity, learning of it, instituted a round-robin policy that guaranteed juniors a voice every quarter. Applause shifted rooms, Sharon noticed. Her ring felt heavier, not as a symbol of love, but as armor that chafes. One afternoon, she arrived at Charity's office with a smile so sharp it could cut fruit. Your popularity grows, she said. It's inconvenient. Charity closed a spreadsheet. Popularity is weather. Process is climate. You sound like a textbook, Sharon retorted. A reliable one, Charity said. You're welcome to borrow. Sharon lowered herself into the chair anyway. Do you know what it costs to be a woman at the top? Yes, Charity answered softly. That's why I refused to pay twice, first in labor, then in theatrics. The words hung between them like a curtain that would not lift. Sharon tapped the armrest. You think I staged that night for you? I think you staged that night for you, Charity replied, steady. I was incidental. Sharon's mouth dipped. Truth had an inconvenient way of removing furniture. He chose me, Sharon said, but it landed like a question. And I chose this work, Charity answered, knowing I can carry it without permission. Silence. Then Sharon tried a different door. Let's talk retention. Your policies have kept 3 analysts from leaving. Charity nodded. Care is cheaper than recruitment. And messier, Sharon said, almost smiling. Yes, Charity agreed. It requires cleaning up Power's crumbs. Sharon rose. I am not your enemy, she said, and sounded like she wanted to believe it. "Then do not behave like one," Charity replied gently. After she left, Charity stared at the closed door and felt a strand of weariness pull across her shoulders. She texted Peace. Compassion keeps asking to be included in policy, and somehow it fits. Peace. That's governance, the kind that changes muscles, not just memos. Charity smiled, opened the retention dashboard, and let the data say amen. The annual gala arrived wrapped in gold and expectation. The venue smelled faintly of lilies and ambition. Banners praised resilience. A string quartet rehearsed scales that sounded like good news clearing its throat. Charity wore a black gown that did not beg, it attended. As she entered, murmurs passed along the carpet. There she is. Board members clustered under a chandelier that dripped light like honey. Mr. Adeyemi found her first, eyes crinkled with pride. "I told you you were ready," he said. "You did," she smiled. "Thank you for seeing it before others would say it." He patted her shoulder and moved aside as the chairwoman approached, cheeks bright with ceremony. "Ms. Okafor," the chairwoman said into the mic when the program began, "has demonstrated a quality we prize above performance. Integrity that makes performance predictable." Applause rose, not frenzied but full. Charity handled the plaque the way she handled pressure, firmly, without impressing fingerprints upon it. She thanked her team by name, then thanked the juniors whose errors had taught her kindness, an inclusion that made several throats tighten. From their table near the front, Tony and Sharon watched. Tony's face was a study in managing expression. Sharon's smile was technical. When the floor opened for speeches, Charity took a breath and stepped to the podium. "Some of you were there," she began, "the night my silence was misread as consent to humiliation." A hush fell like velvet. "I'm not here to revisit grief. I'm here to correct a record. I was already appointed when that spectacle took place. My worth did not shrink because people applauded loudly in the wrong direction." She paused, letting dignity finish the sentence. "Tonight, I thank those who chose courage over convenience in small rooms. I thank leaders who allowed ideas to outshine ego. I thank my mother, who taught me that a steady step is also a dance." The quartet leader put a bow to string. Someone sniffed back tears. Charity concluded, "This region will be led quietly enough to hear good ideas and strong enough to protect the people who bring them. If we must be remembered, let it be for results that made life easier for others." She stepped away to applause that felt like shade on a hot day, earned, expansive, and kind. After the program, a circle formed around Charity, analysts, directors, clients, people who had learned to trust the way she made rooms kinder to be brilliant in. She accepted the congratulations, redirecting praise toward the team as naturally as breath returns to lungs. Across the hall, Tony hovered, then approached with a glass of water because he remembered she preferred it to champagne. "Congratulations," he said, voice sincere in the small way sincerity visits those who have run out of scripts. "Thank you," she replied, taking the glass and setting it on a nearby table untouched. He shifted. "I'm leaving the project," he said, taking a corrective secondment in Accra. "Good," she answered softly. "Learn the difference between spotlight and light." He nodded, eyes glistening with the first useful sadness he had allowed. "I'm sorry." Charity held his gaze for a heartbeat. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "I'm busy." He almost smiled, bowed slightly, and moved on. Sharon approached next, posture impeccable. "You were magnificent," she said, sincerity slipping through a crack. "Thank you," Charity replied. "I hope truly that your leadership continues to make the place safer than you found it," Sharon added. "That is the only plan," Charity said, and they parted like people who might one day meet without resentment. Later, when the hall thinned and the lilies surrendered their fragrance to fatigue, Charity found a quiet corner and dialed Enugu. "Mama," she said when the line connected, "we've come far." Mama Rose's laughter rang warm. "You have kept your name honest," she said. "That is farther than far." Peace arrived, heels dangling from her fingers, victory tired. "Shall we toast?" she asked. "Water," Charity smiled. They lifted paper cups. "To crowns that don't indent the skull," Peace declared. "To rooms where silence is chosen, not demanded," Charity added. Mike's message buzzed in. "Beta users doubled today." She typed back a dancing sentence and tucked the phone away. Then she turned to the small cluster of her team waiting shyly nearby, the juniors, the nearly burned out, the newly brave. "Let's go home," she told them. "Tomorrow we build again." They nodded, relief in their smiles. As she stepped into the night, Lagos offered its usual chorus, engines, laughter, a distant hymn. Charity breathed it in. The promotion letter waited framed on her office shelf. The humiliation waited nowhere now, evicted. She didn't raise her glass. She didn't need to. The city had learned her name, and more importantly, she had learned it too, without rush, without apology, with a steadiness that would outlive the chandeliers. Here's the Bible verse for the story. "Though they gather to shame you in the open, the Lord shall lift you in secret and reveal your crown in due time. For the stone rejected by builders shall become the cornerstone of the house." Inspired by Psalm 118, verse 22, and Isaiah 61, verse 7 moral of the story, never allow betrayal to define your worth. The applause of men can be misplaced, but true recognition cannot be stolen. Even when others plot your humiliation, integrity and patience will always raise you higher than deceit. Your value is not in who claps the loudest, but in the fruit of your labor and the God who rewards quietly and justly. Closing prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you because you are the God who lifts the humble and silences the plans of the proud. When betrayal tried to break charity, you turned her tears into strength and her silence into power. Lord, remind us always that our worth is not determined by the applause of men, but by the crown you place upon our heads in your perfect timing. We pray for hearts that endure patiently, for courage to rise above humiliation, and for wisdom to walk with dignity even in the face of deceit. May every setback in our lives be a setup for your greater glory. Father, let our lives be testimonies that no scheme can cancel the purpose you have ordained. In Jesus' mighty name we pray, amen. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.